And we are live. Good evening, everyone. Today is October 26, 2021, and we are working on the Eastern Orthodox monasteries. Why are those so interesting? Because they are the school of the Christian mystery school. They are, in a way, the what followed the Essenes. Now, if you listen to these podcasts in order, that was 2 weeks ago. If not, you can always find it. It's part of the same series of shamanic across the world. The Essenes were preparing for the coming of Christ consciousness. And so they were preparing a vessel, and then the vessel was Mary, and through the vessel of Mary came Christ consciousness, which was um, the human Jesus, right? Now, this is important because no matter what you want to call it, in this case, we will call it Christ consciousness because it's a Christian mystery school, but it's the same light that we have been studying for the past 7 weeks. It's the fusion of the Trinity of the Creator. Now, there is a podcast on the divinity of the Creator and the creation myths, and it's formed by divine will, divine love, and divine wisdom. Christ consciousness is the yin of divine will and the yang of divine wisdom interacting together that creates this light. Now, if we go a little bit in science, the reason why the planets turn is very important, because if the planet was ever to stop moving, if the magma inside the planet would stop creating a motion that spins our planet upon its own axis, then it would be the same as the moon, always the same face would be facing the sun, so it would become extremely hot, and always the same face would be facing the darkness of space. It would become extremely cold, and the only place that we could actually live would be on that very small margin of the horizon between the light and the dark. That would be the only place we could live. This constant movement is love. It's consciousness of Christ. It's the light. This light is the also in science the quantum energy. So for the longest time, people in the scientific community said that the smallest measurable thing was the electron that composed an atom. So an atom is it could be helium, it could be it's a basic element. It could be oxygen, it could be the different elements that exist, and they're composed of a center and a neutron, and then a positive charge, and around this hovers an electron. The electron is very, 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 very small, and there is space between the nucleus, so the center of the atom, and this electron that's moving around it. And what creates molecules is these different atoms sharing these electrons between themselves. And depending on how it's composed, then you can create things. For example, H2O, it's hydrogen and oxygen mixing together. But that creates water, but this water is filled with space. Now we can't see it because, we see water and therefore water exists, and we don't see the space. But on a atomic level, there is space there. And it's recently been discovered that this space is not space. This space is actually filled with what they refer to as quantum energy. Now, this quantum energy is so small that it can't be measured, but it's everywhere. It's everywhere because it's the space in every atom, and everything on earth is made out of those atoms. So this is why this quantum energy is in everything. It's also in a bottle as much as it's in this book, and it's also in me. So everything is made of this energy. This light When we are low on it is when we get sick, it's when we get depressed, it's when things die. The idea behind the Christian mystery school is to be able to, instead of depleting this light and this energy, to be able to focus it and absorb it. Now, in some movies, in science fantasy or other movies, um, they say that you see witches or uh, bad wizards absorbing the energy from nature and then having power, but everything in nature around them dies. The principle is not wrong. You could absorb energy from plants, you can absorb energy from anything. However, if you absorb this energy and you don't leave any behind, then yes, it could lead to possible just death, because without this energy, there's nothing. So as human beings, we sometimes interact with each other, and through our interaction we're exchanging energy. Now if you love someone and they love you back, there's an exchange in energy and everything is fine. But sometimes when people get frustrated or they get angry and they're filled with resentment, then the only way they can get energy is that they're taking it rather than sharing it, because it's ultimately the first form of greed. They don't know where to get this energy anymore. So the only way they know how is to steal it or take it from someone who is weaker or doesn't know what's going on. An example of that is someone who always needs to have the last word. So the person who has the last word wants that last bit of energy and they want to absorb it. And that's why they won't let you have the last word, because this is how they get their energy. In the book of the Celestine Prophecy, they examine different ways that you can absorb or steal energy from people. You can win arguments, you can have a fight, you can even manipulate it so that, let's say, for example, you're in a room and you give someone the silent treatment, the other person starts feeling bad because there's no energy exchange and they don't like feeling bad. So they'll come over and they'll be nice and they'll participate or they'll try to bring you back. And as they do that, how do they do that? Unknowingly, sometimes, is that they're giving you energy. And so you're winning, and it's an unhealthy process on how to get energy. As the Essenes had prepared for the coming of Christ consciousness, once they recognized that Christ consciousness was incarnated on earth, then they continued with their lifestyle, they continued with their teaching, which, you know, hopefully the idea is we were able to bring Christ consciousness in a pure body. Now, the idea was to themselves be able to transform through the teachings and through the experiments um, that Jesus led during his ministry, to themselves becoming enlightened and therefore being able to ignite the Christ consciousness within them. So now we're talking about ego and spiritual self or soul. In the space of the human body, there's only so much space. And if your ego takes all the room, then your soul is unable to infuse you with this energy that we so badly need. Hence why we're fighting, we have wars and we have arguments, and there's no peace. But now, if you're able, and this is what all of the mystery school, this is what shamanism is all about. We are teaching people how to stop doing that and instead connecting themselves to be able to get this energy from the source. So the equivalent is, imagine we have cell phones nowadays. So I'll take an example of a cell phone. Someone has a cell phone, their battery's running out, and now you can pair two phones together and share the power, right? It's something that you can do with phones now. But if the person whose battery is always low, never goes home and never charges his phone, keeps being dependent on this other person sharing their energy with them for their phone to charge up, well, now the responsibility becomes the other person to recharge their battery. And in that case, we become dependent on this symbiotic relationship that is not healthy. The idea of the teaching that the Christian Mystery School is teaching us is there's no need to do that. They're unlike us. If you forget your charging cord, you're kind of went, I need a cord to plug my phone. We have no cords per se that is visible, but we do have our soul that can be either in our body or just right outside our body. If it's right outside our body, it's disconnected. And so it's time for us to do this connection. This is what the mystery school is teaching. So this is all about energy. This is all about lighting your own heart, lighting your own Christ consciousness that exists within you. It exists, it is there, but if it's in the dark, if it's locked up in a box because you're too angry and or you're too resentful, or you have multiple other feelings other than love inside of you inhabiting you, it's preventing the soul from truly connecting to your heart. And the idea that you must live your emotion and connect with your heart and free those emotions out of you. You must free it. Otherwise, it's taking all the room and your soul's unable to put the connections in. So in that same example with the cell phone, even if you have the cord and you have the phone, if you're not putting the cord inside the phone, well, your phone is still never going to be charged. Yes. And so you are instructed through different cultures, different communities on how do you achieve this connection. This one is one of the most easy to follow, especially if you've listened to all the other videos on the other 6 shamanism across the world. Now, the explanation given by this mystery school becomes so clear and so easy to follow that you would think, well, how come there's not any more people who have this light inside themselves turned on? Well, it's because it requires a certain sacrifice. While we are on earth inside our bodies, we have taste buds, we have eyes, we have hands, we have skin. And when it's touched, that it's either by the sun or by someone, we feel things, right? And our soul loves to feel. And there comes the temptation. And we need to be able to detach from the temptation to be feeling love instead and see how we can express this love and feel this love all the time. So ask yourself the question right now. Do you feel love all the time? And for those of you watching on YouTube, if you want to post comments, you need to subscribe first, but you're welcome to put comments. And I can see the comments straight up on Facebook. So you're welcome to post your questions or comments when I ask a question. I love to hear answers. Do you feel love all the time? If you're gossiping, you're not feeling love. If you're angry, you're not feeling love. If you're anxious, you're not feeling love. So if you're going through this wheel of motions, of conflicting emotions inside of you, once in a while, maybe you feel love, but most of the time, you're not in that space. When you're not in the love space, then your soul is disconnected. So let's see how, through the mystery school of the Eastern Orthodox Monasteries, we can counteract the effect of living in such a materialistic driven world where everything is for the senses. Literally, everything is created for the senses. I mean, even you watching this video right now or listening to this podcast, your senses are being stimulated. However, we're trying to stimulate them for a higher frequency. We're trying to enrich you with knowledge and a path to follow so that you can raise your vibration and then eventually stay in a place where you will be connected constantly with the soul. And I'll be the first one to admit it's difficult. It's difficult because you interact with other people, you interact with different situations. You can't be up here all the time. You need to come down. You need to get up on time to go to work. You need to work. You need to drive your car. You need to pay bills. So all of those things are things that are of the material world. So they keeps like pulling us back. So it's important that as much as we get pulled back, we push back and we return into this space of light. So now, the idea of the monasteries was to provide guides to a mystical path. So the whole idea was not a religious idea, and this is very, very important. It's not a religious idea, it's a guiding principle to your own personal mystical path. So, your own opening of your heart, your own connection to your soul, your own connection to the universe, creator, God, Father, Light, whatever you want to call him. The early Christian monks uh, have left us with a very large body of esoteric literature. And it has a profound range and a great quality of teaching. And then you ask yourself, where are these hidden? Well, they're not so much hidden as there are in monasteries. So not everybody necessarily has access to them. And they're usually quite remote, as you'll see tonight. So making the reason why these manuscripts survived. The lifestyle of these monks was the idea was based on a simple and withdrawn form of life, withdrawn from society, and mostly living in isolation. And it's very interesting because as you go through the teaching, just like all the other mystery schools, there's different levels. And the third level says that you cannot stay in isolation now. You need to return to the world. Hence the difficulty, because it's you can attain a certain level. I have many students that are saying, oh, when I'm in my room, in my meditation room, my healing room, everything is great. I'm connected, I'm feeling the energy, I'm feeling the presence of my guardian angel, I'm feeling the presence, the energy of creator coming to me. It's powerful, it's amazing. And then I leave my house, and all of a sudden I seem to lose my footing. I seem to lose my grounding. This is normal. And that is, I would say, the reason why some of the mystery schools call it a warrior's path, because you have to keep fighting it. The monks were able to devote their time to scrutinizing the different stage and forms of the inner life of the human spirit. For hundreds of years, they worked on what works best, what seems to be working for a majority of people. For some people, it seems to be easier than others. And so they were trying to come up with a way that every person who would enter the monastery on a quest to find their inner connection would be able to connect. Now, didn't say that it was a quick process, but eventually everybody can make this link. And so they were, I would consider we would call them professionals of the soul. That was their role. That was their profession, to map out the movement of the soul and then leave instructions to help their disciples follow the path. They're located in the Eastern Roman world. Okay, so when we're talking about Eastern, if you picture Europe, Russia, Africa, it's Eastern of the Roman Empire. So it doesn't go all the way to Asia. It has nothing to do with Asia, but it does go all the way to Russia, though. And these monasteries were so well renowned for people achieving enlightenment that they became a pilgrimage for nuns and monks trying to work with experienced psychic guides or guides of the mystical path. Their teachings, they were sometimes written down by the teacher themselves. So some of the documents contained in the monasteries are either written by the teachers themselves or posthumously written down from their oral teachings by the students. The which eventually developed a main book of what is called the Book of Mystical Chapters. It contains 3 sections: the practicals, the theoreticos, and the gnosticos. Why does it sound Greek? Because it's highly influenced by the Hellenist area that the Greek would cover inside of the Roman Empire. And that's why we did the Greek mystery school. If you're wondering why the certain things are in a certain order, that's usually explains why. The Greeks had free reign inside the Roman Empire because there were no threats to the Romans. And they had established mystery schools everywhere. But this particular form is the one that embraced Jesus Christ. And out of those came this book. It's arranged with these three sections are arranged to contain 100 either phrase or small paragraphs or concise statements. Three sections of 100. We will tonight read some of those, but obviously I can't read the 300 statements. It would take me hours. But if you're looking for this this information, I will post in the references after the talk. Yes. The book is called The Meditation on the Soul's Ascent from the Desert Fathers and Other Early Christian Contemplatives. Now, the Desert Fathers are the Essenes, right? And the other early Christians are people that came after that weren't necessarily Essenes, but joined the ranks and studied. And through their study and through their own inner development and their own enlightenment, they were able to leave a path to follow to their students. How is this book was used? What was the practice inside the monasteries? Well, each sentence or paragraph was meant to be used as a daily reflection. So sometimes, you couldn't go through the 300 in 1 year. There's 365 days in a year. Technically, you could go through it in a year. However, the first section took years to pass. So you could meditate on a particular sentence or paragraph for a week at a time or 2 weeks at a time until you felt that you've examined all the different aspects of it and you understood its true meaning, and then you could move on to the next one. The second part, the Theoreticus, was only for monks that had several years of experience. And as far as the Gnosticos, very few people made it there. But we're going to see how this all went about. So Hellenistic cultural bias, right? It's based on the Greek. It's largely influenced by them. And the monks, because of that, used the Greek Bible, which differs in form from today, the one we might be using, the English Bible or other source of Bibles that we could use. The monks, when they're quoting certain quotes from the Bible, it's from the Greek version. So it differs in the text and the numbering. So although it is included, if you go to the Bible, it might not match what you're reading. It might be a little bit before, a little bit after. So it's in different orders. But it's pulled from the teaching mostly of Paul. I've read the book and it's done the practice, and it's mostly Paul that they're associating with, which would make sense, right? Because the Greek culture wasn't readily acceptable for the beginning of the Christianity, because at first the apostle taught that this was only for Jewish people, and unless you became circumcised, you became a Jew, then you could follow them. It was quite an upheaval at the time that it became readily that now we're accepting anybody from any culture or any country into the Christianity. It wasn't always that way when it first began. So the Greeks eventually were able to be taught, and they were able to be accepted as Christian. That's why I guess it went from Jewish to a new word, new definition of this group rally, because they had to be identified differently. It wasn't like the Essenes, which were a sect of the Jewish faith. They were something different. They would often refer to text as opposed to quoting it literally, meaning possibly because not every monk had a Bible in their personal possession. So it was harder to quote from memory. However, I don't find this very likely, because one of the things the monks had to do was to memorize by heart the 300 passages. And so if they're able to memorize those 300 passages, they most likely, having dedicated their life to mystical enlightenment search, they would most likely be able to quote the Bible. I think what is more likely is that they valued the message and the teaching rather than the simple memorization of the passages. What does that mean? It means that you can quote anything by heart if you studied long enough and you have a good memory. However, that doesn't mean that you can apply the principle, and that doesn't mean that you can explain it to someone else. Part of what I do is I don't memorize. I have photographic memory. I don't have to put a lot of effort or energy into memorizing anything. But I don't focus on memorizing word by word. I focus more on understanding what is it that I'm reading, what is it that I'm learning. Because then, even if the word is not the same, I'm still able to explain what it's all about. And in doing so, I'm able to allow you to join me in this comprehension and having a conversation. Yes. Um, this is our new puppy that's living with us now, letting himself known. Now, the first part, um, the um, the practicos. Practicos is um, the equivalent of the lesser mystery. Actually, the first two parts are the equivalent of the lesser mysteries. The first searcher had to memorize the book of chapters. Then, at this stage of the exercise, they had to prepare techniques for life or prayers and mystical teachings. So, it's a very it required considerable efforts. There was a long vigils. There's a lot of fasting. They were encouraged to be to practice chastity and demonstrate compassion for others. Predominantly, the focus was on mastering the knowledge of the inner self. What is the knowledge of the inner self? Now, we learned last week the message is know thyself. It means know who you are, know your thoughts, know your words, know your actions, know what you've done. This is, I would say, the equivalent of making the step 4 in AA, Alcoholic Anonymous, when you take an inventory of yourself. It's very much the same. I find actually it's very, very similar, the entire thing, to the 12 steps program of the AA, because you need to look within. And it's not about just blaming others, it's about recognizing your own fault. It's about letting go of the feuds and the angers and the resentments, and recognizing either the played you played in it, or simply that it's outside of you and you have no control over it. So you need to let go of that and just take care of what you can control, which again goes to a principle that the AA are sharing within their prayer, the serenity prayer, right? Give me the courage to change the things that I can. Give me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, and give me the wisdom to know the difference, right? So all this comes from knowing yourself, knowing your limits, your your gifts, your talents. So it's not just about the darkness, it's also about realizing sometimes we're much more than we thought we were. We're so used sometimes to uh living within our limits that were imposed to us when we were younger, or in false beliefs that we can't do certain things or we can't do certain things, that start to believe these things. And now it's this this step of the lesser mysteries is about shattering all these false beliefs. It's about starting fresh and saying, okay, so who am I? What is it that I can do? What's within my possibility or my range? It's about finding your authentic self through the study of your inner self. It's discovering that there's a divine spirit in your human life. And that's the part that is built in God's own image, that quantum light, that energy. What's the difference between a human and a table? Well, the table was originally a tree, and inside that tree there was a consciousness. But once the tree is killed, becomes a table, there's still quantum energy inside of it, but there's no more consciousness that is linked with it. This is why sometimes certain objects become imbued with a certain energy, because the person either works at the same decks all the time and put a lot of their energy field has affected the energy of the objects surrounding them, or someone wearing the same jewelry all their life, while this piece of jewelry becomes imbued with a certain energy. So they had to learn about all of these things at this stage. They developed the wisdom to unmask the different version of their false ego, right? So they previously constructed these masks, these protection, this armor, this wall, whatever you want to call it. And now they had to deconstruct it and remove these masks, they remove these walls in order to find the calm, the integrity, and the stability. When they were able to achieve that, and this is not something that happens overnight, because this is the layer, right? Some people say it's like peeling an onion. I thought I was done with this, and then there's still more. There's more because it's from a different perspective. There's more because it's from a um, different emotion or a different experience. I often tell people you have to learn about honesty. So if I'm asking you right now, are you honest? Now, people who have done no work on themselves, they say, "Of course, I'm honest," because they're only thinking of one perspective of honesty, which is, I owe money and I pay it, or I have a bill and I pay it, so I'm honest. But there's much more to honesty than that. If you look at all the different aspects or perspective of honesty, you can be honest in a relationship with another person, meaning that if you make a commitment to date a certain person, you won't cheat on them. You also have to be honest within yourself. Are you honest when someone asks you, "Do you like this?" and you don't want to hurt their feelings, so instead you say yes, but you don't really like it. There's all these different level of honesty that touch the physical world, the emotional world, the mental world, and the spiritual world. So when you're learning or going through a peeling of one layer of the onion, you usually will peel the physical layer first, and then you'll have to peel the emotional, and then the mental layer, and the spiritual layer. So it's not something that is quick. It's not something that happens right away. You also have to review this life that you've lived. You've lived a life where people have hurt you. They sometimes mean it and sometimes they don't. And you have to review each and every incident and forgive those who hurt you. Because then you'll have to look and review at all of the harms you've caused. And that's a humbling experience, an experience in humility and honesty, where you say, well, actually, when I said this, I was not kind. And then you can try to find excuses. You can say, well, it's not my fault because, right? Or you can say, you know what, I shouldn't have done that, I'm very sorry. And you hope that the person will forgive you, but you have to forgive yourself. And so now you can see that this work all of a sudden is not a race against time. It's taking the time to accomplish it properly. Once you're examined and found to be able to know who you are, have accepted your life, your actions, your thoughts, you made amends, you corrected the course of the way you think, you act, and you say things, you are ready to enter the second phase of the lesser mystery, the theoretica. In this one, it would be young monks with several years of practice, and they were finally ready to see more. Several years of practice. So it always makes me laugh when I have people who are coming to me and they're like, "Well, I've been doing this for years." Yes, that's the way it works. If you're adamant and because you're constantly, and I think it's worse in our time, because at least these guys were locked up in a monastery, so there was less temptations, and if they had to deal with what they refer to as obsession, well, at the very least it was in their heads. So eventually it could be washed away, and as opposed to being constantly being reminded, constantly being tempted and influenced by the external world. For example, you go to the grocery store, you have the best intention of the world to eat properly, but you're walking by the pastry, and although you can say, no, 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 I'm not doing that anymore. I'm watching my weight. I'll do better this time. You're still being challenged. You're still being. But if you lived in a monastery, you're not being challenged at all, because uh, there's just no pastries. And so eventually you can forget about them, right? And this is why they were instructing the monks not to remain in isolation and to have external contact with the world, to really see, did you just forget about it? And if you're put in front of a temptation, are you going to be able to resist? Or have you worked it out of you, out of your system? Or are you still going to fall victim for it every opportunity that it presents itself? And that's the true test. So if some of you think, oh, I need to go to a temple to do this, actually, you don't. It's just a little bit harder. It might feel like it takes longer, but in the end, you have, I think, a greater mastery, because have been constantly being challenged and constantly being put to the test. So now these monks were ready to seek guidance to resolve their difficulties of their inner life that they had awakened at their discovery stage. So now you've done your inventory, you know everything that's been done wrong to you, but you also realize all the wrongs that you've done, and now you're left with all this, right? Now you have to clean it. You have to go through the forgiveness. You find the compassion for them, for you, for the rest of the world. And this is why it's still the lesser mysteries, because you're still working out the garbage. You're still working out the darkness that's stuck inside of you. You're still trying to find the light. So that's why it's still a lesser mystery. This one has 3 stages, as opposed to most of the other one who had only 2. This one has 3. It's divided in 2. The first part is divided in 2. First, find all the stuff, and now resolve all of it. A lot of people are afraid to have a real, true introspection, because they're afraid of what they're going to find. I don't think that, honestly, you'll find a demon, but some people are really afraid to see what's actually deep within them. I'm not sure why that fear is so big and so predominant. None of us were born demons and hid in the flesh of a body, right? So we're all human. And so why are we so scared? What is it that we think we're going to find in the dark recess of ourselves? Maybe it's just, you've been playing victim all your life, and then you realize you were the bully. And people are not ready to face that truth. But that's what the whole first of the practicals is all about, is finding that truth. And it's owning it and admitting, wow, actually, I was not a victim, I was a bully. Or geez, I kept telling people I was honest, but I cheated on my boyfriend my entire life, so I guess I wasn't that honest. And it's becoming those realization, and then realizing what you have to work with, and how much work and how much road you have to walk in order to find this peace and this serenity inside of you. They had to, one of the ways that they would seek to resolve their difficulties was to identify patterns or recurrence that sabotage them in their progress towards a spiritual person. Again, in the Celestine prophecy, this is one of the things we need to do, is pay attention to synchronicity, pay attention to patterns, pay attention to things that keep repeating themselves. As they're repeating themselves, they're letting you know you haven't resolved this. I have an example to share, a personal example. I had a brand new car. Now, I was raised in a family that wasn't rich. Most of my clothes were secondhand. And although we ate fine and we had a clean, sturdy house, my father didn't believe in luxury. So it wasn't a monastery, but it was pretty close. Life was pretty simple, and it was okay. I can't say anything about being raised that way. It made me someone who actually is quite happy with less. I don't need fancy brand names or anything. I just need to feel good. I need to be clean. And as long as I'm dry and I got clean clothes and I'm warm in the winter and cool in the summer, I'm happy, right? I don't need more than that. But you have to then look at then what it is that sabotage yourself in as a spiritual person, right? So if you're everything that draws you away from spirit, everything that draws you away from creator is a sabotage. It could be defeating prejudice. It could be having to deal with repression of yourself. What does that look like? Well, someone who loves to draw but's not very good at it and was told, wow, just don't quit your day job, and they repress their desire to be creative because someone said you're not good at it, just let it go. Yes, some people seem to be born with a talent, but it doesn't mean that if something you enjoy doesn't have it's unless you want to become a world renowned artist and you want to make an income or earn your living by drawing. But if it's just because you enjoy it, don't let someone else repress what brings you joy, what brings you light. You have to then start paying attention as to why did you give that power, that energy to that person. And so at the beginning of the talk, I'm explaining we're exchanging energy. And so when you're coming about and you've made your drawing, you're like, you're happy to show it. And someone says, oh, wow, what were you thinking when you drew that? And you go well, when you go it's energy that leaves you and goes to them. So this is about retaking your personal power. This is about empowerment. Now that doesn't mean that you're going to start being a bully. It doesn't mean that you're going to start wanting to control other people. It's got nothing to do with anything outside of yourself. It has to do with you recognizing truly that past all the darkness there is bright light, there's great attributes, there's wonderful qualities, but they're buried below the weight of guilt and shame and anger and resentment. So we need to wash all of those away to finally see the best within ourselves. This is how we then develop new perspective, new ideas, and new ways to live our lives by new rules, right? After several years of developing your gifts and your talent, believing in yourself, and studying the second 100 paragraphs or phrases, some were welcome. Yes, when you hear something repeating itself, when there's a recurrence in what you're hearing, it means that your soul is letting you know that pay attention. This is really important. And honestly, one of the greatest way to understand these power struggle is through the Celestine prophecy. Right now, we're doing a group and it's studying with the experimental guide, but this is something you can also do on your own. So I'd recommend that maybe this is an easy practice, right? I'm always trying to give you tools that are easy. Not because it's the effort's not worth it. It still will require an effort, but you don't need to have a PhD to understand what you need to do. You can easily follow and find your own truth. So now these monks are some of them are able to enter the higher mysteries. Just like any of the other mystery school, not everybody makes it to the higher mysteries. Why is that? It's not because not everybody is welcome. That's not it. But one of the things that they must do is they must release their obsessions. So I'm going to read from the practicals here. I'm going to present to you one of the things they had to do. Okay. If you store up grievances and nurse old animosity inside yourself and then try to pray, you will be like someone going to the well for water with a bucket that is full of holes. So this is one paragraph. This is paragraph 24 of the first section. What this is saying is that unless you're at peace, you will not be able to go any further. So they talk about anger, they talk about gluttony. So does that ring a bell? That's the seven sins, right? And it says that the one way to beat all of those is to adhere to the virtue, which is what we learned last week, right? If you're compassionate, if you're loving, well, then you can't be angry, you can't be resentful. Yes. So, one, of course, the school are all based in monasteries. So the idea is that they would spend a lot of time in prayer. But what it says is that if you're trying to pray but you're angry, your prayer is not going to raise the vibration anywhere. It's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to touch your soul. It's not going to touch your heart. It's not going to connect to anything because you're building the barrier of anger and resentment. So it can't go through. So the first thing you need to do is to release all of those things in order to be able to find the connection. So the main idea is that they would focus on one of those. I'm going to try to find a short one to give you a good example. A tree will never blossom without water. Without mystical knowledge, the heart will never rise on high. So the mystical knowledge is the water, and you're the tree. Yes. So if you need the water, if you need the energy to grow, you need this mystical knowledge. This mystical knowledge is this peace, this love, this compassion, this forgiveness. And so they would think about that. They would evaluate. So where is my water? What is blocking the water from coming to me? Why cannot I absorb the properties of the water like the tree does? What is it that's blocking me? And this is how the process goes. So for a few days, a week, maybe two, they would ask themselves those questions. They would examine their behavior, their thoughts. They would try to see, while they're trying to pray, is my heart on the prayer, or is my mind being drawn to dinner, or to the argument I had this morning, or to tomorrow, what's going to happen? Or am I in the now and in gratitude, in giving thanks with this prayer? So this is not an easy thing. I've had several students over the years that have been trying to get through these mysteries with me. I didn't call them mysteries, I called them teachings, because at this point in time, there's no more mystery. Everything is in the light and everything is open. So it's not a mystery anymore. Little did they know they were being initiated into the lower mysteries. And although at first they're convinced they're going to do this, they quickly abandon the introspection. They quickly let go of their commitment. One of the things that I recommend that they do is that if they're not in a relationship, I'm not asking anybody who's married to get a divorce, but if you are not in a relationship, then stay out of a relationship. Why is that? Because when you enter in a relationship, if you're not sure of who you are, of what you like, then it will deviate you from your main path. The best example of that is the Runaway Bride. Now, it's an old movie where this woman keeps falling in love, keeps getting engaged, keeps going to the altar, and then running in her wedding dress away. And this man, Richard Gere, tries to tell her this. He says, "You don't even know who you are. So how do you know that you like this person? You like that they like you. You like that they give you smiles and gifts, and and you think that's love, but you don't even know who you are." He says, and she says, "Why would you say that?" He says, "Because every time you meet a new guy, you eat your eggs differently, but always the way they like their eggs. So you melt yourself into who they are and what they like, and you don't even know what you like." And so this runaway bride considers this information and says, "I see." And then decides to take some time to get to know herself. And one of the things she does is she cooks all the different type of eggs. So over easy, scrambled, whatever you can imagine, boiled. And then eventually she decides these are the eggs I like. Not for the sake of this conversation, I can't remember what's in the movie, but let's say it's over easy. So now she realizes, wow, this it took me all this time to figure out what kind of eggs I like. Now I have to figure out what do I like with my hair? What do I like with the way I dress? Because she would dress differently the way she met the different people. She would completely chameleon into transform into whatever their ideal of a woman was, and she had to find her own personal ideal, and that's where the search is. And some people at this point would say, "Oh wow, no, my, do you imagine how much work there has to be done?" And they quit. They had the spark of light, they had the a eureka moment of, oh wow, I got a lot of work to do, but at least now I know I like my eggs. Now I gotta figure out if I like coffee. I gotta figure out if I like yoga. I gotta figure out, what is it I want. And that entails that she's gonna have to do these things on her own and get connected to her emotions and see how these things make her feel in order to decide yes or no. And some people are just terrified by this prospect of how much work they have to do. And or they're scared by the fact they realize they don't even know who they are and they've been living with themselves for 30, 40, 50, and some 60 years. But it's never too late. Now is a great time to start. Right now to, decide, um who am I went through this experience when I got divorced, because while I was married, I was the mother, I was the wife, I was an employee, I was also the cook, I was the cleaner, I was the one who got groceries, I was the one doing the bills, I was the account, I was everything, but I wasn't me anymore. So after the divorce, the children went to their father for 1 week, and I was alone for that 1 week, and then they come and spend 1 week with me. So every other week, I was on my own. And I could finally decide, do I like this or do I not? And then is there anything that I was passionate about that I put on hold? Is there anything that I've been wanting to do and I didn't have the time or I didn't have the energy? And I started exploring each of these facets and deciding yes or not so much. So um, I was lucky because I was given, every other week to be able to work on myself. It was nice. It helped deal with everything else that was going on. But I was able to, just like when you're in a monastery, focus on my time, and I wasn't being pulled away by mom requests and school requests and all of these different pools in all the different directions. I was giving myself the time that I realized I really needed, because I actually lost myself. I just didn't know who I was anymore. And at the time, even though I realized I was lost and that it was going to be a lot of work to find myself again, I, instead of looking at it as a chore or as something impossible to be accomplished, I looked at it with a sense of curiosity of discovering myself again. And this is all about perspective and how you want to see and look at the world. You can look at it as a big chore and a thing impossible to live through, or as a new discovery and a new adventure. If you look at it as an adventure, then it's fun. It's fun to try new things. It's fun to finally get to do something you've been putting on hold. And if you discover, oh well, you know what, it wasn't all that was thought it was going to be, and it's okay because now you know, and you just keep moving on. So once the advanced monks, I'd put in the time and the effort, and they were ready to enter into the Gnosticos higher mysteries. They had time that was spent with masters, um, with more experienced monks, and the junior monks were excluded from these conversations, um, because these conversation, these exchange have to happen in a place where there's no judgment. They have to happen in a place of inclusion, acceptance, and compassion, a place that junior monks might have not reached yet, and that's why they were kind of secluded in the higher mysteries. The state of understanding what is written in reflections, um, the state of knowing of the truth, that we are filled with God's energy, that God therefore is this energy, and so God lives within us, and we are partly God because we are one with God, because everything is of this energy. Although our consciousness is our own, it is part of the greater picture of this light energy, of this God energy. This became knowledge that was banished or destroyed under the orders of the bishops, who disapprove of this content. Because you see, what happened is that there was a division in the church. So I'm going to talk about that in a minute. However, even though those documents were banished and destroyed in a lot of the different monasteries, let's say across France and Italy, in the more remote area, they were untouched. And so they survived. And they explained the inner working of the Christian mysticism through personal wisdom. These texts are not difficult to understand if you've had training of the lower mysteries. You can easily flow through the higher mysteries. I don't find it hard. I can read through them and I'm like, oh yeah, this is that, this is that, this is that. And it's very, very clear. But you have to understand the premise before you can understand the conclusions, yes? So the goals was to let others know they had experienced the moving of the divine spirit within, and they were ready to communicate on an equal level of this higher mysteries. Interestingly enough, in Gnosticisms, the Christian mystery school, women were equals and welcome. They were called the desert mothers. And the only thing that was different between men and women is that by then there was not an easy access to the literary education that was fundamental to preparing the rhetorician and the writers of the time to write their own dissertations. And so there's less traces of their passage, but some did manage to write and be represented, and such as Amma Syncletica and Amma Sarah. So Amma is mother. So they become the mothers and then their name. The monks of Athos in Greece collected many of these major writings done by the graduates of the higher mysteries. And they put it into a multi-volume collection called the Philocalia. To this day, the collection continues to be the chief inspiration for spiritual work in those monasteries. So now, what were they trying to achieve? Well, it was the quietness of the soul. If you're familiar with Christianity, they will tell you it's a little still voice, meaning it's not going to start screaming at you. It's going to almost be like a whispering. The whispering is always ever so present. It never goes away. However, if you fill the space where this voice is trying to pass with noise, with anger, with all these other things, distractions, obsessions, then it can't go through. So the lives of the monks was arranged to create such moments of quietness through simple and repetitive tasks like gardening, sweeping, painting, chanting, praying. A practice used even in Buddhist temples. It's called the working meditation, or they are. There's very little difference between. Actually, no. That's a prayer is a form of meditation. And this was the form of meditation practice in those monasteries. So they would repeat the same phrase all day like a mantra, like while weaving baskets or accomplishing a chore. So they would repeat it, and then they would see what that quiet voice would bring, what the message would come. Although our lives are much busier, we can still create those times to meditate, perhaps 3 or 4 times a day. Or if you're really ready, like when I went on the Camino, I was asking a lot of people, so what makes you come here? Because the Camino it's time out of life, right? You're there to walk. Some people are there on a vacation. Some people were there for 10 days. And that's all the time they had, but they figured they needed to get away, they needed to spend that time. And that's a walking meditation. So you're walking. And although you can talk with people you meet along the way, a lot of the pilgrims will walk in silence. A lot of them will simply um, have clear the mental as they're walking, because there's no other distraction. They can finally cut it to pieces and examine all its different facets and finally release it. Um, for us to help us on this walk of 33 days, we each day add a simple theme to work on, much like the monks in the monasteries are examining their anger. And we did the same, except that the monks could have spent months looking at their anger. We only had one day. But throughout that day, we're walking 6 to 8 hours a day, and you're alone with yourself and you're examining, now what is anger for me? When does it come up? Am I angry now? And you're surprised that as there's no distraction, your soul is like literally cleaning up and going, oh yeah, you still have anger about this, look at this. And then you are feeling through this and you're letting it go. You're dumping everything behind you as you're walking freer and freer with each step. So it's not impossible to be able to do this, but sometimes when you're really ready for a great cleansing or for the next step, or there's something that just you can't get through, these are good times to exercise this practice. It was extremely beneficial for me to remove myself for 6 weeks. And some people were there. What pushed them to go there? For me, it's something I dreamed of doing for 10 years. I was looking for this spiritual and enlightenment experience. I was completely a spiritual thing for me. And this is why we travel all over the world all the time. We pick the center of the chakras of the planet and we connect with those energy, and we clean that chakra. All that is stuck in there gets washed away in this powerful energy that Mother Earth gives us. And so some people were there because they just got divorced. Some people were there because their mom died, their husband died, a child died. They were there because they had come to an impasse in their life of something that was so distraught, just made them so distraught that they needed to pull themselves out of it completely in order to come back and face it. They had to rebuild themselves emotionally, mentally, or spiritually in order to face the situation. So at first, when these horrible things happen, when we lose someone or we lose our job or we lose our business, and we think, this is horrible, where am I going to go from there? And taking some time to reflect on that is an opportunity that life gives us to pull away and maybe this time go on the right path. Identifying what didn't work in order to now try again, and this time not make the same mistakes. When can we make this time in our daily busy lives? If you don't have time to get away, you can do it while you're waiting at a bus stop, you're riding a subway. I had a friend of mine who had to get up really, really early to get to work because she had to take the subway for like an hour and a half to get there. And I told her, I said, you can meditate while you're on the subway. You can put your headphones or noise blocking headphones. So with no additional noise added to it, or very, very quiet music. And you can do this inner meditation every day. If you're in the subway, an hour and a half in the morning and an hour and a half on the way back, that's a 3-hour day meditation. That's awesome. Use your time instead of filling it with people are waiting, right? You can see this. You can see it in movies, but you can see it everywhere. They order something and they whip out their phone right away. They're on their phone. They're checking. They're liking. They're posting. They're constantly being stimulated by media, by radio, by noise, by lights, by everything surrounding them, and all of this time is time that you could instead go, let's check in. How am I feeling? What is going through my mind? What is going through my heart right now? What is going through my physical body? Is there pain? Is there discomfort? Do I need to stretch? What is happening? creating moments of silence in your daily life. Once you become consciously making these choices, you will find that there's a lot of time that you were perhaps wasting away or misusing in doing things that didn't bring you anything for your soul, but now you can do that. So you can ask yourself, if you take these phrases, for example, what does this mean to you? Have I really already experienced this, what it says in this phrase? How can I illuminate the truth about my own heart? Right? What's in my heart right now? What am I feeling? It also, you can spend this time focusing on, okay, my friend is troubled, their heart is breaking, is damaged, and how can I help them see the light out of that situation? What is the secret ways that God wishes us to develop me? Why did God make me go through this situation? Why do I have to live this? What is in it for me? What is in it for everybody else involved? And what does God want me to learn from that? Those are all questions you can ask yourself. Just like at the end of the day, instead of just going to bed, you can ask yourself, did I do my best today? Did today, was it the best way for me to work, to interact, to communicate? And if it's not, you don't beat yourself up. You become consciously aware of it, and then you change. You prepare for the next time that this situation occurs. You will react differently. You'll try something new. And then you can evaluate this new reaction or this new way of communicating, if that worked well or if it did not. And then readjust from there, and keep readjusting until you, and it's not because one way works for one person that don't necessarily work with everybody. And so it's a trial and an error. As long as you put your best foot forward, you put your best self, your best effort, that's all that's asked of you. This conscious, and remember, I'm saying conscious effort is recognized, and the light inside of you grows because you are trying. The spark is there, and once the spark is lit, the fire keeps growing until eventually it will be all that would occupy your heart. You will have burned away all of the crap, and you'll be left with light only. Um, the beauty of it, I said that it's not a religion. Well, it's not a religion because there is no particular idea of God that is described other than God is light. That is the only thing. God is energy. And the only requirement is that you admit the existence of a creative intelligence or a supreme being. And that's all that's required. So that's beautiful because you don't have to adhere to any church. You don't have to have any dogma to follow. This is truly about your own inner personal work. And that's where you get the psychic insights. Just like the seeds and plants, insight, it grows with time, it grows with introspection, it grows with honesty, and it grows as you're changing, transforming, and healing your old wounds. That's how you learn. That's how like I said, okay, so maybe this conversation didn't go so well. I'll try this next time. No, not quite there yet. That's not the results I was expecting. And keep trying. That is eventually how you will identify, oh, this type of person, that's what I've worked with before. That's what works best for them. And then you apply it and you see. If it works, great. If it doesn't, readjust. Right? The purpose of the teaching was to serve as a guide to the higher path of mystical knowledge. So it was a guide. It was not necessarily, how can I say this? A guide shows you the way, but you have to walk the rest of the way, right? I'll tell you, you're looking for the church. Well, you go 1 kilometer, turn left, and then you'll go around a semicircle. It'll be on your right. I guided you there. You know the path, but now you have to walk this path. You have to make the effort to get there. That's all on you. And that's the beauty of the mystery school. All of the mystery school, all of the shamanic practice, you always have guides that are there to guide you. However, they won't do the work for you, and they will not take your power away. They won't say, oh, let me do this for you. No, you need to do this for yourself, but I'll be here. I'll be cheering for you. I'll be supporting you. And if you need more directions, I'll meet you at the corner over there. but you have to make the effort. You have to do the work. The monastic keepers uh, were men and women that were spread out over the Greek territories in the late Roman Empire. They were also in Syria, Persia, on the both shores of the Niles. They were into places in Africa like Nubia and which is in the modern Sudan, or highlands of Ethiopia. They were also located through rocky terrains and deserts as Sinai, Palestine, Arabia, and Turkey. And so once these pilgrims at first started coming to the monasteries, then they grew in popularity, and they were even built in France and Italy. They had three forms of living. They could live in isolation outside some village, or in small communes of hermits gathered together as a remote village, or a few dozen monks or nuns living together under the same roof. They were very, very common by the 4th century, and they flourished for like 1,000 years under the patronage of the Christian emperors. It's then that they developed monasteries as far as Kiev, Athos, and mountains in Transylvania. Those are the ones that have survived the destruction of the writings. The monks' growth in spiritual teaching over the course of this long period of time helped them accumulate and really distill the knowledge to develop an optimal path for their fellow to follow. So just like when you go on Google Map or you go onto your GPS, sometimes it will tell you this is the fastest route, this is the shortest route, this is this route that you can choose. This is a no toll road, and you choose. Okay, so the monks decided that, you know what, the fastest is not always the best. Sometimes the shortest path might be the best, but it's not necessarily the fastest. So they then develop this book of mystical chapters. Their complete dedication to this enlightenment path for the search of God was through this simple life, to discipline work, to celibacy, chastity, and it was all about finding God within themselves, which is why it wasn't very much appreciated by the church, because the church is the complete opposite. So when it became that Christianity became a state religion, that's when they kind of separated. Now, one of the most important teacher that we have is called Origen of Alexandria. He was a Platonist philosopher who created the extensive and very elegant system that interprets the scripture on how to purify the soul and assist the illumination and the ascent of the students. Any further spiritual theology was based largely on his work, and it was Evagrios of Pontus who was the most successful in combining the highly intellectual tradition of Origen with the daily needs of the community of the monks seeking enlightenment. Okay, so that means that at first, the pilgrims could have been rich aristocrats. So they weren't the one cleaning the kitchen and cleaning the lavatory and feeding the chickens and taking care of the gardens, right? They were there to study. They were immersed in their own little world. And with Evagrios, he says, okay, well, this is all fine and dandy, but we have to eat. We have to keep the place clean. We have to clean our own self. So he integrated this into a more of a daily life for the monks. So as the Christianity developed in a state religion, the debates went over for many generations. I know a lot of people think that it was that one council in 321 after Jesus that everything happened and it was all decided in one go, but that's not true. It actually was hundreds of years of debates and controversy and wondering, which books are really gospel, which aren't, and this is the development that eventually decided, okay, these are the books, that's the Bible, that's what we're basing ourselves on. That's when they removed the reincarnation out of the Bible. That's when they removed a few things. So all the texts that talked about reincarnation were taken out. They decided we're going to communicate this, and everything that's not this is removed. But it took a long time. Um, the idea of the this book of mystical chapters is that it preaches a gospel of knowledge, telling us how to attain grace through faith, um, but not faith alone, which is what the other ones mainly decide. That's the main difference between the two. Because here it says it's more than just faith. It's you have to be compassionate, you have to be loving, you have to be something. You can't just have faith that God exists. That's not enough. And all this inner work, this inner search, this inner development, this connection to the soul was survived in the remote monasteries. They were dedicated to this quest for the peacefulness and the purity of prayer and mercy. The Reformation did not reach those far off monasteries, and so they escaped the Middle Age control, centralist control, and with the rise of Islam, they were further isolated. Those monasteries in certain areas, and that's why they survived. And they pretty much to this day kept the original patterns of life that was set out hundreds of years ago. And the manuscripts were preserved and copied and passed on as basic training for generations of spiritual students and monks. So the actual manual of Philocalia, the book of mystical chapters, contains several different authors with different themes. In the first section of the lesser mysteries, in the practicals, the monks will ponder on watchfulness, and they will learn about the ladder. Now, this is the same ladder that explains the descent of the soul into matter, being now challenged with all the senses of the flesh, and recognizing its own spiritual nature and climbing back the ladder. This demonstration of prayer. Now, remember, Jesus tried to teach people how to pray. He says, pray to yourself, pray inside, pray directly to your Father as you talk. Don't pray about yourself, pray about knowing what divine will is. And so you can do what divine will is expecting of you, as opposed to what you want. Because sometimes I talk about in my classes about manifestation. I'm like, what is it you truly want? Because if you're asking for money, but what you really want is a way to transport yourself from your house to work, well, maybe you don't need money. Maybe you just need to be connected with someone who works at the same place as you and will do the commute with you, and you don't have to take care of a vehicle. You don't need a driver's license, and so sometimes we, in our prayers or in our requests and our demands, we want things and we want them a certain way, a certain color, a certain shape, and it might not be the best way. So if instead we truly explain, this is what I need, what I really need, not what I want, how can I get that? What's the best way for me to achieve that? And then sometimes when we're facing with indecision, we have to ask yourself, what does God want me to do? You were put on this earth for a reason. We all have a higher purpose. Our soul sings when we're able to achieve this purpose. I have the greatest faith that what I'm doing is what I am meant to do, and the universe will look after me because I'm doing what I'm guided to do. So I'm following the guidance, and I let go of any concern, of any worries, because I don't know how it's going to come, but I know that it will come. And so I need to trust and I have to have faith. But it's going to come because I'm doing my own personal walking on this path. It talks about the 50 spiritual homilies. It talks about how those who think they can negotiate their salvation. The 8 vice. So it's interesting. They have 8, not 7. There's chapters on prayers and the 3 methods of prayers. There's an address to the monks. There's the saying of the elders, the saying of the Egyptian fathers, which would have been the Essenes group, and the discourse on charity, and practical and gnostic chapters. Practical is how you put it into effect? How does that apply to your daily life? Then, after several years of studying, applying, cleaning, washing of yourself, you get into theoretikos, the theory of enlightenment. This is when you have made a complete inventory of who you are, the harm that was done to you, the one was done to others, and it's you turning it around into forgiveness, into living in the spirit of love and compassion. So they would read and learn about watchfulness, spiritual knowledge, again, reviewing the three methods of prayers. There's messages from monks of India and their wisdom. And remember, the Essenes had connection all over the ancient world. And even here, in those monasteries, that knowledge is available to them. It wasn't so, the Gnostic is about knowledge. So if it's considered wisdom, they didn't care if it came from Egypt or India. They would include it because it's wisdom. It would be the book of perfection, chapters on prayer, another address to the monk. There would be something about love, chastity, and various texts on theology. After several years of that, if they manage to be able to do complete cleanse, to turn their life around, to turn their attitude around, to develop new perspective, live based on the ideas of inner peace, of tranquility, then they were welcome into the Gnosticos. So again, it's not that nobody was welcome or you have to be part of a certain clique or just certain people were allowed. That's not it at all. It's the level of introspection and inner work that needs to be done. Not everybody would be able to achieve that because their will failed or they just decided it was too much for them. I don't know. But those who finally made it through, they would read and learn about watchfulness, Gnostic chapters, the parable of Dives and Lazarus, the parables of the vineyard. They would learn about heresies, love, transfiguration, virtues, spiritual knowledge. Again, more information from the monks of India. Discrimination, prayers. There was a final address to the monks. The other 50 spiritual homilies. They would learn about the life of Christ, the hymns of divine love, and the Gnostic chapter, and it ends with the mystical prayer. So I was saving this mystical prayer for the end. And I would like to read that mystical prayer to you. This final, very final, ultimate chapter of the three section of the Book of Mystical Chapters ends in this way. Come, true light. Come, eternal life. Come, hidden mysteries. Come, nameless treasure. Come, ineffable one. Come, inconceivable one. Come, endless rejoicing. Come, sun that never sets. Come, true hope of all who wish to be saved. Come, awakening of all who sleep. Come, resurrection of the dead. Come, powerful one who ever creates, recreates, and transfigure by your simple will. Come, invisible one beyond all touch and grasping. Come, eternally motionless one, ever active to come to us and save us who lie in hell. Come, beloved name repeated everywhere, whose existence and nature we cannot express or know. Come, eternal joy, come, untarnished crown. Come, royal purple of our great King and God. Come, jewel belt of shining crystals. Come, unapproachable sandal. Come, imperial vestment. Come, sovereign right hand. Come, Lord, whom my miserable soul has longed for and longs still. Come, solitary one, to this solitary, for as you see, I am all alone. Come, for you have alienated me from all things and made me alone in this world. Come, You who have become my desire and have made me desire you, the inaccessible one. Come, my breath, my life. Come, consolation of my pure soul. Come, my joy, my glory, my endless delight. For I must give you all my thanks for making yourself one with me in spirit. This was written by Simeon, the new theologian. Now, if we go back and we quickly look at it, it calls God in through all of the different ways that they can. Come true light because God is light. God is described in the other chapters. Now, I just read the 100th one, but God is simply described as light, as energy, as everything that comes alive with its energy. So, eternal life. It's hidden because we can't see it, it's inside of ourselves. Um, it's the sun that never sets. They compare God is God is to the human soul like the sun is to the planet Earth. It's ever shining, it's ever bright. It's only when the earth turns that it goes into darkness, but the sun is still there and is still shining. Therefore, it's us who turns away from God in our own shame or our own guilt. But God still is there, still is ready to love us if we find ourselves worthy of its love. This mystical prayer is saying, I find myself worthy. I am open to receiving these rays of light. Shine your light inside of me. Come within. Awaken all who sleep. Those who sleep are the one walking in darkness. Those who are not walking with God. Come, resurrection of the dead. This is talking about this initiation they had to go through for the death of their senses. This mystery school explains it very clearly. If you're able to eat healthy, have you won over the obsession of wanting to eat sugar or of wanting to eat or drink alcohol? Those are two very different things. So it's not just overcoming your physical actions, it's also overcoming your words, and it's also overcoming your mind. And that's the biggest battle. Um, you know, I'm not eating sugar, but is the obsession about sugar finally out? Are you finally free of this constant desire? It could be a desire for sex. It could be a desire for whatever. Whatever it is in your mind, you may have made peace with it physically, emotionally, but yet mentally it's still there. It's still harassing you constantly. You're not free of it. At this point in stage, the resurrection of the dead means that the soul is resurrected out of this pile of obsessions and senses and is finally free of it. Um, Come eternally motionless one because it's present everywhere. So technically, it doesn't have to go anywhere because it's everywhere already. Come, beloved name repeated everywhere, whose existence and nature we cannot express or know. It's especially back then when they didn't have science or quantum to explain things, it could have been a little bit harder to understand. But what it is that since this light is within everything, it exists in everywhere. Now, there's air here, obviously, because I'm breathing. And even in the air that I'm breathing exists God, this energy, because in the air, it has oxygen, it has nitrogen, it has a whole bunch of different components. I'm breathing oxygen, but I'm breathing everything else that comes with it. And it's all made of atoms, and all atoms is made of energy. This means that you are constantly in contact with God. At every time of the day, at all the time, you are in contact with this creator, this wonderful energy. And this energy is also in everything and everyone. So in a way, you're never alone. You have your own awareness of who you are, but you're like the drop of water in the ocean. It's hard once you realize that you're the drop of water in the ocean, that you are part of the ocean and the ocean is you, because without you, if we remove all these drops of water, there'd be no ocean. But you're one and the same. There's no separation. That is how it is on a spiritual level. There's no disconnection. There's no separatedness. This path, this challenge was to realize that. Royal purple of our great king, and the jeweled shining of the crystals. It's talking about all the different chakras, different energies in your body, how it's all moving. The ideal that these monks were hoping for is that all desires would have been transmuted into the desire to going back to the source, into being one with this source and being completely connected at all time. That was their main goal. So to overcome all senses and to be able to simply join. And there it is. So I have quite a few people watching. I am just wondering, do any of you have any questions? Anything that I didn't explain properly, or anything that you would like to ask now? Now would be the time. Anyone? So it's the Book of Mystical Chapters, one of the best version that you can find, is translated and introduced by John Anthony McCaukin. Excellent book. And I have an off-topic question, but I'll message you directly. Probably no, it's live. Go ahead, ask me. We're here now. We might as well ask, and might benefit other people who are watching. Go ahead, Quinn. For those of you watching and it's not live, you can post your questions and I will be able to answer at a later time. I follow all the comments being posted after the video. The videos are going to be up forever. So even if it's been a while since I've made this video, I'll be happy to answer your questions. If you are more interested in developing yourself or working on yourself or learning more how to do these things, just go see my website and see what classes we offer, or contact me through email, messenger, or even by phone, and be happy to answer your questions. So I'm going to let go of YouTube now. Thank you for watching. And next week is our last presentation, and it's going to be shamanism with the Native Americans. So for some of you are going to feel more at home in that definition of what shamanism is. It would make more sense, but you're going to find that it relates to all these other mystery schools, and that's why we're concluding with that in our segment of this this series. So now, Quinn, I'm wondering about